Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live. I have Melanie Murphy again today. She is going to be talking about the paleo diet and answer your questions. Thank you guys for all sending in your questions. And if you're just jumping in, you can type your questions in the comments anytime. We like this to be interactive and we want you to really participate in this. So don't be shy. Melanie Murphy is a registered dietitian. She has her master's in nutrition, longevity, and health span from USC. This is so right up our alley. And she has a lot of experience. She's just plugging on in. You can find everything about Melanie on Health and Wellness on Instagram. And she's also got a website called melaniemurphyrd.com. Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. Good to
Good
see
to
your
see you.
shining face.
Likewise, happy Saturday. We're
Thank
still building
you.
Saturday, right? Even across the
Yes,
world.
across the
That's
world, you're
funny.
right. Melanie is in Los Angeles and I am in Spain. So this is
Yes,
amazing. We can make this happen. And
I know.
you guys who are just jumping in, why don't you type in the comments where you are? It's always interesting to see where you're at. And again,
Yeah,
if you're just popping in, please ask questions. You can type them in the comments right now. Anytime you have it pop in your head, because we can always scroll and answer your questions after answering the first one. So please don't hesitate. This is a real
perfect.
interactive thing. So we do have a list of questions. If you guys have already sent me questions before, so I will make sure I ask Melanie those. But before we do get started, Melanie, can you explain, maybe there's some people who don't really know what the paleo diet is and what is that different than maybe some of the other diets that are around?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to talk about the paleo diet. It's probably of trendy diets that are out there. I think it's on the right track. There are ways to improve it, but it's on the right track. So the concept of the paleo diet is so we have in the 21st century we have so many um, diseases that are a result of very high processed foods and high sugar foods and heart disease, diabetes that didn't necessarily, and this is you know um, cavemen died earlier anyways, but these weren't necessarily things that plagued our very, 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 very old ancestors. So the paleo diet kind of looks at, well, what can we do to um, adopt a lifestyle and food that is more along the lines of what our caveman ancestors ate to help reduce some of these 21st century diseases that we have, seen spikes in
Mhm.
over the past decades. So that's the impetus of the paleo diet. If you are, I mean, just to give you a quick overview of what it is that what the actual nutritional profile looks like.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, if you're following this diet, and I hate to call this one a diet because it really is more of a template. I think paleo
Yeah.
diet, the reason I like it is because it is a template. It's not saying yes, no necessarily, unless you are following it super, super strict. Then most of the grain and carbohydrate category would be out of, you would not want to eat.
Yeah.
So,
But is there, like,
but
compared to the keto, like you said, like the keto diet, when we talked about that last week, it was clear that its origins were for people who had epilepsy, like kind of wow,
right,
and then the side benefit
right,
was like, oh, people are getting healthy too.
yeah,
Like, was there anything that
clear,
this paleo
yeah.
diet did from the beginning and we didn't know, and now it's just a side effect
Not
is that we're all getting
necessarily for,
healthier?
yeah, great question. Not necessarily for one specific disease state, I wouldn't say, but rather, a variety of disease states, and the fact that diabetes, obesity. Oh, I think that if we could classify paleo as addressing any one thing in particular, it's probably um, obesity as a general category. And obesity has been shown to lead to a variety of chronic health conditions like diabetes, heart disease, all of that type of thing. So
Hmm.
but no,
Hmm.
it was mostly a broader discussion about why is it that in today's day and age we're getting all of these diseases that maybe our ancestors didn't have. So it was
Hmm.
really just to address that particular component of our current lifestyle, which is why, so much of the grain category is eliminated. And that's, we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a couple minutes here. But yeah, so the paleo diet would be super high in fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, fats, lean, animal proteins or proteins in general, and fairly low in grains. And we can talk about that too. I feel like there are ways to modify the template for paleo diet to be a little bit more sustainable in the long run, which is something I can chat about in a minute.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. So it's like you said, it's a blueprint or a template, which can give us a little bit of flexibility to change the diet for our maybe certain particular health goals. So like I said, so it's really hard to say, oh, you can eat this and you can't eat this if they're kind of flexible with that. But if I were to go to a restaurant and say I'm on the paleo diet, like what kind of things would I be able to choose from the menu? If my goal is to say lose weight.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you are following the paleo diet as the paleo diet was written, quote unquote, you'd probably get a lean meat, either a chicken or a duck or a fish, some sort of seafood, and some vegetables, probably, zucchini, squashes, carrots, broccoli. You could slather that in olive oil. You could get, some sort of, nut-based pesto on top. You would not be able to go to a restaurant and get, pasta, or something with rice
burger
necessarily. You could have the burger without the bun, because technically the debate is still out about the potato category with paleo. If you're asking my opinion, which you are, I think you could modify the paleo diet to be to include more starchy vegetables like potatoes, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, and even some white rice, I would say, if your system tolerates that in small quantities, because, eliminating the grain category as like a sweeping rule, and that's something I talked about in the keto diet too. You can't just say yes or no to anything. And if you take out a full category like that, you're going to lose weight in the short run, but you're going to be missing out on a variety of nutrients and health benefits of that particular food category also. So, adjusting it a little bit is beneficial.
Yeah. So some of the carbs, say, that you'd want to get in a paleo diet that would be acceptable, and usually with people would be maybe quinoa and some potatoes. Is that what would you say, quinoa? Is that considered pseudo grain, or where is that fit?
It's a pseudo grain. If you're following a super strict paleo diet, none of that's allowed. I personally, quinoa included. My personal opinion, though, is, and this is especially true for women, females. We have there are hormonal processes in our body that require certain types of carbohydrate. Once again, this is something that you can't just blanket say, I'm not going to eat carbohydrates. I think that it's important to look at your personal body chemistry, where you are in your life cycle and hormonal cycle, and kind of adjust this particular diet to meet that. Because I think, eating quinoa has some great health benefits. It's a full, complete protein. It's already sprouted in most cases, so it's a little bit easier for your body to digest. But even some white rices, wild rices, these kinds of things, if you eat them in moderation, in addition to the general template of a paleo diet, I think you'd be in a pretty good spot. But the biggest,
it seems like, go ahead.
I was going to say the biggest reason the paleo diet has such a big win to it is that it is intrinsically reducing your processed food and sugar intake from refined sugars and foods that otherwise are pretty low in nutritional value.
Yeah.
So
it seems like every diet is agreeing with that. It seems like you can have vegans and carnivores, fighting, to the end of the earth, but they do all agree that just fewer processed foods is pretty, I don't know anyone who says sugar, white sugar and, some of these things are good for you. I think they all agree on that kind of stuff. So that's already a win. I think if you can get that, just the processed foods, whatever they are, like you're
Right.
80% of the way, being healthier. But there seems like there's also a spectrum of when it comes to grains, because paleo can be very confusing. Some people just categorize things as carbs or no carbs. Rice is carbs.
Right.
So what do you mean? But
Yeah.
it seems
Right.
to me there's this spectrum, where maybe rice would be on the lower end of the spectrum, and then wheat
Yeah.
maybe on the higher end. And where does like spelt and rye and the quinoa and like all these things like fit on that spectrum? Or is that even not worth talking about? Because I think there was a
No,
lot of questions
no, it
about,
is.
is tapioca is like, I don't
Yeah.
know, there's
Yeah.
all these like, so
No,
if you could
it's a
maybe
great
categorize it.
question. It's a great question. And I think it's a very relevant question. I think it's one that if you, and there's a lot of lists, and maybe I'll send this to you afterwards for you to
Hmm.
post, or I'll create something and we can, share it with everyone who's on this call. That there is an inflammatory spectrum for the
Hmm.
grains, and wheat, obviously in its finest form is near the top of that spectrum. So if you think about it from an inflammatory perspective, there is a
Hmm.
decreasing, risk factor, I suppose. The pseudo grains like quinoa are usually fairly on the low end of things. If you're going for the wheat category, so there's or gluten rather. If you're going for the gluten category, wheat is definitely at the high end of it. Rye would be on the low end, for instance. So
Hmm.
if you wanted to include gluten as your grain source, choosing a rye option or even a spelt option would be a less inflammatory option than, say, just straight whole wheat, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Rice, especially white rice, has been shown to be really easy for most bodies and most systems to digest. It's one of my go-to grains. If you have any sort of digestive issues, I would say stick to white rice versus something like brown rice that is a little bit harsher or a little bit harder for your body to break down.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Isn't
you
that
can,
interesting? I think a lot of people get surprised about, oh,
yeah,
everybody's so much into the brown and the whole grain and this and that. That always surprised me when I first found that out about the paleo. I was like, oh, white, is a little bit easier to digest. And so,
yeah, for
it's
sure.
great that we can have sushi again. Like some of you
Yeah,
guys who are just
there you
popping
go.
in, please ask your questions. This is very interactive. You
Hi,
can type it in
Sarah.
the comments now and ask Melanie anything about the paleo diet. So please take advantage of that.
Yeah,
So going back to some of our other questions, I think some people, when I mentioned to my clients about paleo, first thing they say is like, I don't want to eat all this red meat, or I don't want to eat a ton of meat. So I
yeah,
think there's a little bit of a misconception about how much animal products to eat. Because when they think
yeah.
paleo, they think caveman. The caveman they eat, on a big, big bone of of a
Um,
pterodactyl or something.
Sarah, just to answer your question, answer your question really quick about the sweet potato on paleo. Sweet potato is probably the best form of potato to eat. If you're following it, like I said, I think and I want to get back to your question. Sorry, I just saw that one
Mhm.
pop
Yeah,
up.
yeah, it's okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Good to answer it. Yeah.
there is if you're following a mega strict paleo diet, then any potato sources would technically not be allowed. I think of paleo diet as a template, a canvas for which you can get a little creative, and a lot of people do include sweet potato on paleo diet, and sweet potatoes are a little bit more nutrient dense than I would say like a white potato. But they both provide really, really great nutrients. So yeah, I would say from my perspective, sweet potatoes are a go, as well as
Hmm.
some other um, lower inflammatory grains like we were just talking about.
Can you actually clear also some confusion about the potato? Because like potatoes are
Sure.
back on the menu again. Even the white potatoes, a lot of people or nutritionists are also promoting and saying, well, there is, maybe white potatoes has certain nutrients that maybe the sweet one doesn't, but the sweet one has this, and somehow we're all able to eat potatoes again. What is the why is white potato sort of back on the menu, and what are your thoughts on if we should include this in the diet or not?
I love potatoes. I think that they're great. I mean, so again, I like to always, and this should just always be, in the back of your mind that everybody is different. And there are people that don't tolerate potatoes. Their body chemistry actually doesn't tolerate potatoes. But as a category, potatoes are super high in fiber, in healthy, plant-based fibers and nutrients, and even the white potato. And white actually, as a color, provides a lot of, antioxidants that we need too. I think that the reason the white potato got so much flack, or continues to get a lot of flack, is that our diets are so, the potato has been used in processed foods as like as the main category. And because of that, it's gone through a variety of processing that isn't necessarily great for us. Eating a full whole potato in its regular form, chopped up, grilled in your oven or on your stove or on your grill or whatever, great. That's a natural occurring vegetable. It's a really great thing to include in your diet. Eating a potato chip, that's a processed version of a potato, right? Yeah, and French fries are actually, depending on where you go to get them, I wouldn't say, I know, Sarah, that's so funny. French fries are not a bad option, especially if you make them at home. You can make you can just cut up your potato in a different, size and shape, and season it and bake it in your thing. There you go. You have potato or French fries. Yeah. Great. But I think that the reason it's gotten so much flack recently is because, or in, the last decade, I would say, is because we have so much of the color white in our diet. And I think that's why sweet potatoes have tended to be, the sweetheart of the potato category, just because it provides different type of antioxidant, different type of nutrient because of the color. And we have so much white in our diet, in the American diet. So color your plate.
Makes sense.
If you,
yeah. When I was in Peru, I went to the local market and I was shocked at how many different types of potatoes and colors they had.
There's purple potato. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the Japanese.
So many.
In Japan, they also had crazy potatoes, and the same thing for quinoa. Like, I didn't realize there were all these colors for quinoa, because in Peru, evidently, it's very, very indigenous to their culture. So I was really surprised. So I think it's always great to add variety, and if we can add, white potatoes and purple potatoes and orange and yellow, and then this is great news. And for me, it also seems like the cooking method is probably more important, because if you have just a white baked potato, maybe it's better than a sweet potato that's deep fried in some oil that you have no idea where this is coming from. And,
absolutely. Yeah, and eating food in their most natural state is always the better option, right? But you bring up a really good point, and I don't mean to like kind of detour a little bit, but the thing about the paleo diet, like I said, if you can think about it more of a template, instead of saying like, oh, grains are bad, instead think like, okay, intrinsically the paleo diet is eliminating some of these really refined, high saturated fat, high refined sugar, foods from packaged foods, processed foods, that kind of thing. That's the better thing to think about with the paleo diet. And it also eliminates some of the more inflammatory foods like dairy, like gluten, all of these things. But again, finding your perfect medium is something that's going to be a lifelong journey. It's not just like a sweeping, yes, this work, I'm paleo, and I feel like you have to be a little more personalized. But you bring up a really good point. So the paleo diet is looking at our caveman ancestors. I would like people to think about the paleo diet instead, and go back to their ancestor roots, specifically geographically. Like, look at where your great grandparents lived. Look at their geography, look at what grew and naturally in their areas, and stick to something like that. That is actually, there's a lot of research that's coming out right now about, instead of saying, oh, this is what, because cavemen, actually, there's a lot of cavemen that lived in places where carbohydrate rich foods were plentiful. So,
Yeah.
this idea that, carbs and whatever are not allowed in the paleo diet, like, well, where did your ancestors come from? Not all of us are, some of us are Northern European, some of us are from South America. Lots of different foods grow in those areas. So I would go one step further and say, look at where your grandparents, great grandparents are from, and start eating foods from that. Yeah, I was actually thinking about you, Sarah. I was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
She's in
our
Puerto
root
Rico.
vegetables are huge in
Yeah.
Puerto Rico. Yeah, you get those nutrient, because your body has evolved from that, right? Especially if um, have a long lineage in a particular region. I mean, I'm a little bit of a mutt. I have lots of kind of everywhere in Northern Europe, but especially if you have a long lineage of ancestors from one particular region, your body has grown accustomed to be able to digest and tolerate certain types of food from that area. So instead of just saying, our caveman ancestors only ate seeds and nuts and berries or whatever, well, let's look at where specifically
Yeah.
your caveman ancestors are from, and start to
Yes,
incorporate those
because
diets.
such a great point. Because yeah,
Yeah.
it's not they all weren't European, right?
Yeah, and not all, I mean,
Paleo
yeah,
people, cavemen.
yeah, and it also kind of, and there's lots of research being done on this particular topic as it pertains to longevity too, which is,
Hmm.
something that I'm super excited about once some of these studies are coming out. But one thing that's really interesting is that, like, it makes you question, like, some of these fad foods too. I mean, like, I love an avocado, but avocados are
Yeah.
not indigenous to my people, my ancestors. So, and I
Oh,
actually find that
yeah.
I
Interesting.
don't
You're right.
necessarily, and it's great. It's a great food, but it doesn't always, you have to think about it that way instead of just
Hmm.
saying,
Hmm. Yes,
anyway,
this is
I,
good
I
for
went on a
you.
little bit of
And
a
in fact,
tangent, but
yeah. No, it's super interesting. Actually, if you guys who are watching now, please ask your questions right now. Take advantage of Melanie. It's such a treat to have her, and a real privilege. So in the comments right now, you can ask anything about the paleo diet or just diets in general. So
shoot it at
I
me.
yeah, I love this. So actually, I noticed, so as with some of my clients, I've been living in Hong Kong before, and in Hong Kong we have Chinese, Indian, and you have Europeans, everything. So all my clients from all over the place, and I noticed that, say the Asians, there was no way they wanted to give up rice. So if you wanted to put them on, like, a keto diet, or if you wanted them to, it just would be impossible. Or get the Indians to drink a
Yeah.
cold green shake in the morning. Forget it.
No.
Like, cold is not in
No.
their vocabulary. So I think
Yeah.
I love what you say about the paleo diet being a blueprint, because it
Yes.
sounds like it's much more adaptable. And
It is.
Coco
It
asks, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Did you see Coco's
I saw
question?
I saw that question, but I can't scroll. I don't know if I can scroll up.
She
Did you see
asks,
it?
what would you recommend
Oh,
at
there
a
we go.
first step when choosing a diet? There is so much information out there, and where would you start?
Oh man,
Good
the
question.
age-old question. The age-old question.
What do
Um,
I eat?
yeah, I would say if you are very new to the idea of, your diet being, a lifestyle that you're about to embark on in a different, mindset, and a different mindfulness mindset, I would say the best advice I have to you is to choose foods in their most pure form. So,
Mm-hmm.
try to stay away from things that are in packages, like granola bars and things like that. Go explore the farmers market in your local area, see what vegetables and fruits are out there, and start to get curious about how to use them in your daily life. Like, because I am not about, the trendy diets and saying, oh, this is what everyone should follow. It's never going to be the case. Your body is unique to you. It's unique to where you're from. It's unique to your environment. There is no one size fits all for anybody, but there are some general rules of thumb, like reducing the processed foods that we eat, which is why the paleo diet is kind of, revolutionary for its time. It's like, oh, let's not eat all of this packaged, and if you look at your nutrition facts labels, if you have a nutrition facts label that is like, 800 ingredients deep, 55 of them are things you can't pronounce, probably not something that's going to sit well with your system, you know, versus
Yeah.
grabbing an apple and some peanut butter. Great. Not to say that that's a,
Hmm.
you know, everybody's favorite thing, but I think that's the best advice I can give to you is to start to look at your food in its most natural state, and start to
Hmm.
explore. Listen to your body too. I mean, our bodies are talking to us all the time. Bloating is not
Hmm.
normal. If you're bloating after a meal, let's look at that meal. Something in it is not agreeing with you. So start
Even,
just
yeah.
taking tabs about what it is that makes you feel good, and what energizes you, and what slows you down, what's making you feel fatigued, maybe a little sick feeling or achy. All, you know, these are all things our bodies are trying to tell us when we're eating, you know, that
Mhm.
we sometimes forget to engage with ourselves when we're trying to choose a diet that works best for us.
Oh, this is
I hope that
great
hope
advice.
I hope that answers
Yes.
our question.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure it does. And this is what I love you so much, is because we're so much on the same track. And I've had clients who just tell me they're just crying because every time they eat beets, for example, they're bloated and their stomach is churning, and they're so sad. And I said, why is it
Stay
sad?
away
She goes,
from
because
beets. Yeah.
beets are healthy. Everybody says beets are healthy. I should be eating beets. And I'm like, beets are not healthy for
Yeah.
you. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
like your body
For
is
you,
telling you
for you,
something
it for
just for
you, it's not
you.
healthy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also another thing that, you know, I'm trying to make my work very, you know, to work, I work with my patients on trying to eliminate that thought of good and bad foods. And I think that's the part about these trendy diets that I tend to really cringe about, is that, oh, suddenly something's bad and this is good and this is bad. That doesn't exist in you know, the world of diet and lifestyle. You have to, there are things that are better for you maybe, but that's specifically to me. Like for me, for my diet, for my body, I do not tolerate dairy. But dairy can be a really nutrient dense food for somebody that tolerates it. It's not that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
dairy is a terrible food. It means that you need to,
Mm-hmm.
is it right for you? Is it in, and is certain types right for you?
Mm-hmm.
Beets are healthy, I
Yeah.
do. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Beets are healthy. But they're not necessarily healthy for somebody that can't digest it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
every body is different, and I think that the best thing that you can do for yourself is to take a moment and just be mindful about where you're at after you eat a food, and start journaling about it. Like, hey, because some foods might energize you and you didn't even realize that, like, you know, maybe beets are really great for your system. You're like, holy shit, I feel like I could like do a few errands right now. That's your body saying, hey, yeah, let's keep this in here, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway,
One person's superfood could be another man's poison. Like
yeah,
that's,
exactly.
we
And
never
there's no
know.
one size fits all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why, just
So
talking about the paleo again, it's like that's why it would be really, really interesting to go back to your specific ancestry. Where are your people from? The
yeah.
geographic, you know, plants that grow in that region, because you probably are more apt to properly digest those types of foods. And let's start there.
Yeah.
Let's see
Yeah.
what that looks like.
What I would love to talk about next week, because we're just winding down. We'll answer your question in a second, Coco. But next week, if Melanie's up for it, I would love to talk
Always up
more
for it.
about our ancestry, maybe the genetic side. My big question is, you know, I have Eastern European genes, but I grew up in 6 different countries, very different cultures,
Right,
from, you know,
right.
Brazil to Hong Kong to, you know, Europe. It's just like all over the place. And I remember Dr. Volterlongo, who's you studied
Oh,
under,
my
in his
my dream.
book.
I love him.
Yeah, in his book, The Longevity Diet, he was talking a lot about eating, like you said, for your ancestry and your genes and things like that. But what do you do for people like my clients in India who grew up, born and raised in Hong
Everywhere.
Kong? Like,
Yeah.
so I'd love to talk about that next week. So that's just kind of
Yeah,
planting some seeds.
we'll put a little pin on that. That's a great topic. I mean, there's so much to be discussed about that for sure. And
Yeah.
I, like I said, I'm a mutt too. Like my ancestry is very, you know, yes, Northern European kind of, you know, I've got classified. I have this one area, but there's so many different diets in the, you know, varying diets in that region.
Yeah.
So It's
Oh
certainly
yeah.
something we can delve more into next week for sure.
That would be great. So
Yeah.
let's answer Coco's question, then we're going to have to go. She asks thoughts on juice detoxes. It's sort of off the paleo track, but maybe related. Would a paleo person do a juice detox? And what do you thought? We could actually do. We have to do a whole other
Did the
thing on
cavemen? No,
detoxes.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Did the
I'm
caveman do
kidding.
a
I
juice
know.
detox?
I'm kidding, Coco. That was a silly joke. Honestly, I am not a big fan of juice detoxes, and I don't like to just say that without knowing the context behind why you're doing a juice detox and what, where you're getting your juices and what the purpose is. But that being said, when people just juice a food, you are basically taking out all the fiber. So the sugar in fruits and vegetables, if you remove the fiber, you're basically just getting the sugar, which it does the same thing as eating, a carbohydrate. A typical carbohydrate source would do. It spikes your blood sugar up and then crashes you right back down. The fiber in these foods are what actually help to balance out your system and help keep your blood sugar stable. So I struggle with people that want to use juice detoxing as like a reset, because it actually could be doing more harm than good to your system. So I'm not the biggest fan, but I say that with a caveat because I don't know why you're doing it. And if you want to chat with me
Mm-hmm.
a little bit further about your specific needs, let me know, because we can maybe
Mm-hmm.
come up with something a little bit different for you.
Oh, I could totally agree with that. The more I get to know you, Melanie, it's like, oh, the more I love you, because I feel exactly the same about
Yeah.
juice detoxes, and they're such a fad and so many people are doing it. And I have it for the same reason. And of course, with the caveat, like, it depends what your goals are and do you feel good? Is your, body agreeing with it? And, a lot of questions, questions that need to be answered, I think, before you
Yeah.
recommend a juice detox,
Yeah,
right?
physiologically though, I mean, just because it's coming from a fruit doesn't mean it's digesting any different than refined sugar is being digested in your system if you just, start drinking
Yeah.
juices like that. So anyway,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know if you could answer Dahlia's question super quick, because we did have a talk, Dahlia, you missed it, on fasting. You would have been a great
yeah.
question for a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago. But she's doing Ramadan right now and struggling to do
hmm
sports. Yeah. What do you think about people doing sports while they're on a Ramadan fast?
I think that's what she's asking. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing. Ramadan's so interesting because it really flips your circadian rhythm on its head. Granted, it
Mm-hmm.
is for a short period of time. I do have some friends that when that time of year comes about, and that do still do workouts. I think that you need to be a little easy on yourself during when you're practicing this type of fasting method, just because you don't know how your body is going to react, and you might not have the same energy levels during Ramadan because of just the sheer fact that you're eating only at night, and you're skipping this big calories in the daytime. I don't necessarily think it means that you couldn't, though. I think you just need to be a little bit more careful about what types of foods you're refueling with once you're able to refuel. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's a tough one. I don't I think
That's
I
a really good point you brought, because the types of foods that you're eating when you're refeeding from the fast could be influencing how
yeah,
she's feeling, why she's
able to
struggling so
recover.
much
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
exercise. So
Yeah.
maybe play around with, foods that are agreeing with you and that are more nutrient dense, and then
I
maybe
think
see if
I
that
think
energizes you
yeah, I
more
think
than what kind
for
of
Rama.
exercises. I don't know.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think it's mostly a refueling for Ramadan, for people that are in sports. I mean, I would my first instinct would be to try to prep your body with healthy fats, because healthy fats will fuel you for a longer period of time. If you're in a
Mm-hmm.
normal eating cycle, carbohydrates are usually the source of food that you use, right before an exercise to get you going. But fats are what keep you going, right, for a longer period of time. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's something that you look into when you're prepping for, or during Ramadan, that you focus more on healthy fats that are going to help get you to the next
Mm-hmm.
day.
Actually,
And
that
you, I mean that
fuel. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that kind of goes to the whole um, ketosis that we talked about last week a little
Ah.
bit. But yeah, fueling with fats is going to be helpful during Ramadan, I think.
When you said fueling with fats, it reminded me of when I very first discovered paleo was with Mark Sisson, right? He's how can you talk
Okay.
about paleo diet without knowing Mark Sisson?
Right.
He's does
Yep.
the Mark's Daily Apple. If you guys want to know more about
Yep.
the paleo diet, I think he's a great person to follow. And I remember his explanation about carbs and fats, and he was saying that it was such a great analogy. It's like imagine trying to build a fire with twigs. You know, you just have to keep putting in the twigs, you know, just as they get off, they
Mm-hmm.
just go down again. And that's what he identified as carbs because they're just burning so fast. So if you have a high
Fast. Yeah,
carbohydrate diet,
exactly.
you just need to eat again. You're like, I just ate. Why don't I eat it again? Because of those twigs. But if you can look at fats as one big log and you try to build a fire and that log can just keep burning,
Mm-hmm.
then that's the kind of fuel that he was
Yep.
proposing as fats. And I thought that
Yep.
was I've always remembered that. And I think that's a great
Oh
analogy. You can
yeah.
always kind of
Oh,
remember that.
yeah, and that's exactly what it is in our body too. You know, carbohydrates are only a couple connections deep. Fats are like 7, 9 chains long. You know, so if it is
Hmm.
exactly that in our body too, the way that the molecules are actually digested. So
Super interesting. All right, I'm going to let you go. We're
yeah,
going to continue if you're up for it. Are you up for
yeah.
next week?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Yahoo!
love our Saturday tradition. It's fun.
Yay. And if you guys have questions, please send them to Melanie or send them to me. We're taking everything. I'm taking notes all the time. And join us next week, same time, same place. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I think, if you're up for it, some of our genetics, some of our ancestry, and how
Yeah,
we
would
should
love
be
it.
behaving and living for that. So if you want to find
Yeah.
out more about Melanie, please find her on Health and Wellness. Health and then the letter N and wellness, okay, like M&Ms,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. There you
But not
go.
the M&Ms. And she's also got a website, melaniemurphyrd.com. Melanie, I'm going to have to make a photo or something, or I
I
post
know.
you
I'll
somewhere
I'll
on my
I'll
wall
send
so that
you
people
one.
can always
I'll send you
find,
one.
yeah, can always find you.
Yeah.
So I can direct people to go find
Thanks.
that. So thank you so much for
Thank you
answering
guys.
all of these
Oh my
questions.
gosh.
And
Thanks for having me on always. I appreciate it. It's fun.
oh, thanks. Well, have a good day, a good night, good morning,
You,
wherever you guys are.
yeah, exactly. Thank you guys so
And
much. We'll talk to you next week.
take
Thank you,
care.
Zora. I appreciate it. Yeah. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.